Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how you doing?
Doing all right. Looking to this game, looking to travel up to Seattle.
Yep. Like you mentioned, we are here today to preview the Packers' upcoming matchup on Sunday Night Football against the Seattle Seahawks. Packers are 9-4, Seahawks are 8-5, but have won 4 straight, so they're on a bit of a tear right now. Should be a very good game. I'm jealous that you guys are going to this one. I hope it doesn't rain too hard on you, but we'll be talking all about that, about the weather, about the matchups, about everything coming up. But before we get into any of that, just wanted to pitch a couple of things. If you like what you hear today, please subscribe. Please leave a review. Please leave a comment. We would really appreciate it, whether that's on, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you consume podcasts. We would really appreciate any interactions. It would really help us out. Tell a friend as well, get the word out there. We'd appreciate it. And then follow us on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out, whenever there are roster moves, injury updates, Packers-related news, whenever we put new episodes out, content from other Packers content creators, one-stop shop and everything Titletown, so check that out. But Dad, bit of news, though. We do have one piece of roster move that we needed to talk about that we didn't talk about the last time, and that is that Jonathan Ford has been signed by the Chicago Bears off the Packers practice squad, so he is no longer on the Packers practice squad. He's been on the Packers for quite a few years now without really getting much playing time, but he's been hanging around, but now he is on the Bears, and the Packers' corresponding move is they signed defensive lineman Jeremiah Martin to the practice squad, so defensive lineman for a defensive lineman. Ford has just been on the team forever, but never played, so...
Never played.
Yeah.
Yeah. Frankly, this is probably a good thing for Ford.
Yeah.
He could go from being like deep, not able to get time on the Packers to maybe being, frontline starter for the Bears.
Yeah. He will probably, it'd be hard for him to get less snaps than he was getting with the Packers. So yeah, hopefully he can catch on somewhere else. He's been around the Packers. They seem to be very high on him. I would not be surprised if a year or two down the line he's back on the Packers. But just something to note there is that the Packers are making some moves along the practice squad as once again they're getting a guy sniped off their practice squad. Seems to keep happening every single week after the Vikings did it a couple weeks ago. But anyway, Dad, should we move on to the injury report for this game, because it is a bit lengthy on both sides?
Yeah, and some impact players. We can maybe go over the sort of the highlights rather than the entire list, which is very lengthy.
Yeah, so we do have, as of, we're recording this Friday afternoon, we don't have the Seahawks full injury report yet, and actually we don't have the Packers full injury report yet, but we do have the practice report from the Packers and Matt LaFleur's presser, so we do have some updates there. Let's start on the Packers side, though. It was announced today by Matt LaFleur in his presser that Jair Alexander is not going to be able to play in this game. This marks the 4th straight game that he has missed with that PCL injury. The quote from Matt LaFleur was, quote, "Based on what I saw the past couple days, I didn't feel he was ready to play," end quote. And then Tom Silverstein also added something about, they didn't want another situation like it was with the Bears game where, he tried to play, played 10 snaps, wasn't ready, et cetera, et cetera. This marks 4 games, though, now with that PCL injury that Jair has missed, which is obviously not ideal. It's at the point where it's like, dang, probably should have just put him on IR. Dad, thoughts on that? Thoughts on that going forward? Thoughts on the corner room in general? Let's just talk a little bit about Jair, because, it's tough because he's such a good player when he's able to play. But the fact that the quote that they didn't like how he looked out there, that scares me a little bit, because that, maybe means that the PCL is not healing how they hoped it would. Because they did mention, when this injury first was announced, which was after that Bears game, that he probably just needed a few weeks rest. It's been 4 weeks now. Thoughts on that?
My main thoughts is that he's just not quite ready yet. I didn't take it to be quite so dire as you are. I think, in terms of him not looking quite ready, I think he's maybe getting closer, but not quite there. He did practice more, I think, this week than previous weeks. So I think I'm taking that as a sign of progress, but he's just not quite there yet. That's how I'm going with it.
Yeah, he was, a full participant on both Wednesday and Thursday, rather, before, not being able to go on Friday. But just looking back, last week he was a limited participant Monday and Tuesday before not participating Wednesday. So I guess that is a step in the right direction, but still not ideal that it's been 4 weeks and he's still out. Beyond that, I think it's safe to say that Javon Bullard is probably not going to be available for this game, although we don't have the official report yet. He's still dealing with that ankle injury. He didn't participate in practice Wednesday or Thursday, so kind of safe to assume that he's not going to be out there. So you'd have to imagine that they're going to go with probably Valentine and Stokes on the outside with Keyshawn in the slot. you'd have to imagine.
With Jair and
Bullard both out. Yeah, so that's probably going to be a shuffle there. Some good news, though, in the injury report. The first is that Luke Musgrave has been designated to return off IR. Now, he's probably not going to be available in this game, but it sounds like, he's working his way back. I think that could add a lot of dynamism to their two tight end sets, rather. Now, it's not like he was playing,
We don't necessarily want dynamism to two tight end sets.
Yeah, but
a little bit...
I think Sims is solid, but I think that the speed and athleticism that Musgrave provides could make those, more threatening, even though he wasn't playing great when he was playing earlier in the year. Hopefully he can bounce back a little bit. It's not like he had like a torn tendon in his ankle, and so they had to do surgery, so that sounds very painful. And he was practicing with a torn tendon in his leg,
right. So
which was crazy to me.
Didn't shut him down a little earlier with a torn tendon.
Yeah, I remember at the time they were like, yeah, it was a lot more serious than like we realized, and it was like a testament to Luke Musgrave's toughness. And I'm like, yeah, no. After I'm hearing that he tore a tendon and was trying to play on it, yeah, no
this
crap.
Is like the guy who lacerated a kidney and showed up. It's like, you know what? Maybe I should get this checked out.
I'm peeing blood, so maybe I should go to the hospital. Yeah, I think so.
Peeing blood, is this a bad thing? Should I go check this out?
Yeah, so, hopefully he can come back and give the Packers a little boost on offense going into the home stretch here. And then some other good news is that both Romeo Doubs and Evan Williams have cleared concussion protocol, so that's awesome. So they're going to both be available. And then Matt LaFleur also said that Edgerrin Cooper is going to be available on Sunday as well. So getting some reinforcements back on the second level of that defense, at safety as well, getting Romeo Doubs back. Obviously it stinks not having Jair out there, but they are getting some reinforcements, Dad.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that, the middle of the field, intermediate part of the field, coverage and defense will look a little better.
So yeah, that's the big thing is I want to see what the middle of the field defense looks like with Edgerrin Cooper in like nickel situations. Because I think they're probably still going to play McDuffie and base, which I'm fine with. McDuffie's a really good run defender. Like he's a very good run defender. And I think he's a big part of why the Packers run defense has been really good so far this year. But he just can't cover. Yeah, I mean, he just can't do it. He can't move backwards. It's like anything happening behind him, it's total loss.
He's good at running forward into the gap, and
he's a great tackler. Yeah, he's a great tackler. He's got good bursts, like moving forward, but it's just anything behind him is just a mess. So I want to see Cooper in that role. Obviously, it's not fair to expect him to come back and immediately save the middle of the field defense. I don't think that's necessarily fair to expect, but I hope it looks better. Now, at the same time, Seattle doesn't like really attack the middle of the field that much, but it is something to, I want to see coming in. On the Seahawks side, though, we don't have, as of Friday, their full injury report yet. But Kenneth Walker, their starting running back, did not practice either Wednesday or Thursday and didn't play last week. So with a calf injury. So that's going to be someone to keep an eye on because he is super explosive when he does play. Now, their backup, Zach Charbonnet, had a really good week last week and is a good player. But that 1-2 punch is way more dangerous than just one of them alone. So that's one to keep an eye on. And then beyond that, Trey Brown, one of their starting outside corners, didn't practice either Wednesday or Thursday also. Jarek Reed, one of their depth safeties, didn't practice. And Brady Russell, one of their depth tight ends, didn't practice. But Walker and Brown are the two to keep an eye on there mostly. Yeah,
and I don't expect that if they have to go with Charbonnet the whole game, it's mostly going to affect their depth. The one thing that Charbonnet has actually been more effective on an EPA per rush and rush yards over expected than Walker. But the one thing that Walker has is breakaway speed.
Yeah,
4.38 instead of Charbonnet's 4.53, and he has a much higher rate of like runs over 15 miles per hour.
He's a strikeout home run hitter, and Charbonnet is a single and doubles guy, which having them in tandem is better than just having one. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. We'll see later in the week. Once again, follow @FatherSonPacker. Later today, we'll get that full Seahawks injury report out to you. Once again, that's @FatherSonPacker on Twitter. But Dad, let's move on to the game preview overall. And let's start with some quick facts. The game is in Seattle, 5:20 p.m. local time, which is 7:20 p.m. Lambeau time. It's going to be 47 degrees with a chance of rain, so bring your poncho, Dad. Then the Packers.
But I think we're going to be okay during the game hours.
Hopefully,
when it comes to rain, but it'll be chilly.
Because 47 and raining is not a fun viewing experience. Packers are favored by 2.5 points with an over/under of 45.5. I'm a little surprised to see the Packers favored by this much on the road. But over/under 45.5 for an implied score of 24-22 Green Bay. So what are your thoughts on that, Dad? Any thoughts on that spread? I'm a little surprised the Packers are favored. The Seahawks, only a game back of the Packers, have won 4 straight, are playing really well, and we'll get into some of the stuff that they've been doing on the defensive side of the football. But thoughts on that spread? Thoughts on the over/under?
I was surprised when I first saw that the Packers were favored. Especially the Seahawks have been playing better lately, especially on defense. And the Packers haven't won in Seattle since like 2008 or something.
I think really, it's been that long, man.
It's been a long time. I forget exactly which year it was, but it's back a ways.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Seattle, though. What's been going on with them? What's been, how have they been playing this year? They're 8-5. They've won 4 straight. They're leading the NFC West right now. What's been going on with Seattle?
Yeah. So right now they are, I think, holding the 3 seed, and it would actually be a Packers-Seahawks matchup in the playoffs in Seattle if the standings remain the same. They're averaging for the season, they're 19th in points per drive and 15th in yards per drive on offense, compared to Green Bay, who is 8th in points per drive and 13th in yards per drive. So Green Bay's had the more productive and consistent offense, you'd say, for the season. On defense, they are 7th in points per drive and 8th in yards per drive. Green Bay is 10th in points and 14th in yards per drive. So the Seattle defense has been a little bit more consistent or effective than the Packers for the season.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me right into the hey now play nice, if you don't mind us just transitioning right into that, because yes, their defense has been good on the season. Their defense has been playing out of its mind since the bye. Since the bye week, this is just a couple numbers for you. These are per NFL Pro and also RBSDM. I think these ones are actually per RBSDM. Since the bye, so the last 4 weeks, it's small sample size, but they're second in EPA per play at negative 0.142. They're first against the pass and 5th against the run. And then they're 6th in success rate at 40.2%, 5th in passing success rate allowed, and 3rd in rushing success rate allowed. So they're top 5 by every single metric, or all the metrics we really, really care about in both the run and the pass. And you might say like, oh, just since the bye, like, is that really a tangible change? Like, what's really going on there? Well, really what happened over the bye was they changed starting linebackers. They moved to Tyrese Knight as one of their starting linebackers, a rookie who I think we both liked as a late round option.
You spotted him first.
What can I say?
Draft
what can I say?
I got to give you some shine for that, because you were like, who? I'm like, who is this guy? It's like, oh man, he's got a good profile and not getting any attention on those just draft sites.
Sort by missed tackle rate and go to the lowest, and that's what I did. And I was like, oh, Tyrese Knight, this guy tackles really well, like, and he's expected to go in the 6th, 7th round. I mean, couldn't hurt. But yeah, he's been really good for them. And that change, actually followed immediately. In week 8, they traded for a new linebacker in Ernest Jones. So since week 8, they changed both starting linebackers, and when they changed that second starting linebacker spot is when this defense really took off. And it's not like they've played, nobodies over that stretch. If we take a quick look at the Seahawks defense, I know it's only 4 games, but over that time, they played the Cardinals. They played the Cardinals twice, actually.
Twice, right. Yeah.
They played the Niners and they played the Jets. So, Jets, meh offense, but Niners, they're a solid offense, and that was with Brock Purdy playing. They held them to 17 points. They held the Cardinals to 6 points and 18 points and turned them over multiple times. And those are very good offenses. So the Seahawks defense is definitely not to be trifled with, and they've been very on fire since the bye, and I actually have some more post-bye numbers for you later. But Dad, what are you looking at when you're looking at the Seahawks and saying, hey, they do this really well?
Yeah, so I was actually also ended up on the defense, and particularly what I pulled out was their defense of wide receivers. Their coverage. According to NFL Pro, they are second best in the league in defending slot receivers by EPA per pass. They're 5th best in the league in defending wide receiver ones by DVOA, according to FTN Fantasy, and 9th best in the league in defending wide receiver twos. They are also 5th best in covering the short area of the field by DVOA from FTN Fantasy. And they also give up the 8th lowest yards per pass play and the 10th, and have the 10th best EPA per pass play on the season. So that's you had the last 4 weeks of how much better that's been. But for the whole season, these are numbers from the whole season where they're actually good and presumably better in most of these metrics over the last 4 weeks as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a testament to their corners. They might be without Trey Brown this week, but, Tariq Woolen and Devin Witherspoon are 2 very good corners. Witherspoon especially, who's been playing the nickel for them, and they're going to send him on some blitzes too, so the Packers are going to be ready for that, which I'll talk about later. But Dad, transitioning over to things that we're nervous about. What are you nervous about in this game in terms of what do you think might be a tough matchup for Green Bay? There's a couple different things we could pick at here, but what are you looking at?
Yeah, so I flipped to the other side of the ball, as it were. So one thing was deep passing, especially against our backup corners.
Yeah.
On passes over 20 yards, Geno Smith has a 94.9 PFF passing grade, the 3rd best in the league. The 3rd best adjusted completion percentage, the 5th lowest turnover-worthy play percentage, and the 8th best EPA per dropback,
Mm-hmm.
and 100.2 passer rating. So even though and then against the Packers on the other side, even though for the season Green Bay has the best EPA per pass on defense against deep passes, since the bye, they have finished with an average rank of 10th in the league instead of first. So 12th, 14th, 3rd, and 12th.
Yeah, so pretty much without Jair is what that stretch is.
Jair with missing the whole game or playing a few snaps against the Bears.
Yeah, and that's why I think, having Evan Williams back in this game is huge. Something that I think it was Justice Mosqueda pointed out on the Pack-A-Day podcast was that, when Zane Anderson came in for Evan Williams, they were actually bringing McKinney down to the box and having Zane Anderson deep. I would be scared of that against, a combo of Lockett, DK Metcalf, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. And, you mentioned corners, being out in this one. I would probably argue that at every single receiver spot, I would give the matchup strength to the Seahawks. Like DK versus Carrington Valentine, I'm going to lean DK. Sorry, Carrington Valentine. Tyler Lockett versus Eric Stokes. Oh my goodness, that could be a nightmare. And then Jackson Smith and Jigba versus Keyshawn. I gotta lean Smith and Jigba, who we'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, I think that's going to be a really tough matchup for the Packers secondary in this one. And I guess we'll see. I think the safeties are going to have to really cover for the corners in this one.
The safeties are going to have to do some heavy lifting in this game, I think, to keep the top on the defense.
Yeah, and luckily the Packers have a couple of really good safeties, but you can only ask so much of them, and it's going to be a tough one for this one. For me, the thing that I'm nervous about is blitzing from Seattle. So if we rewind back to Thursday Night Football last week, the whole first half, mostly the first quarter, but really the first half, Packers just had no answer for the blitz and seemed perplexed that the Lions would even blitz. And, over the course of the season, Love has been pretty not great against the blitz. Although since the bye, he's actually been a lot better. So I think some of the movement coming back for him has, helped him against the blitz. But overall in the season, he's like in the mid-20s in EPA per play against the blitz. Since the bye, he's like, top 5, top 10 actually. So that's better. But just to rewind last week to the Lions, just to circle back to that, they blitzed early and it was really hard for Green Bay to do anything. It was generating one-on-one matchups against, the Packers offensive linemen that they were losing against backups. And so when you're going against guys this week like Leonard Williams, who, I would say is a top 5 defensive player of the year candidate right now with how he's playing and how that Seattle defense is coming on. You got Uchenna Nwosu, who is I think eternally one of the more underrated linemen in the entire league on defense. So you got a couple of guys coming after the passer, and the reason I'm worried about blitzing is the Seahawks don't blitz very much. They're only 23rd in blitz rate, but I would imagine Mike McDonald watched that game last week and is like, we're going to see if they have a better plan, because the Seahawks don't blitz much, but since the bye, on 32 dropbacks they've blitzed, so small sample size, but on those 32 dropbacks, they're allowing just negative 0.75 EPA per dropback. That's a small sample size, but it would blow out of the water the current first place blitzing team, which is the Lions, at like negative 0.37 EPA per dropback per blitz dropback. Then it would be the gap between them and first, and the gap between second would be bigger than the gap between like sixth and seventh, or second and seventh rather. So they've been insane at blitzing. They don't do it very much, but they've been insane at blitzing since the bye. They love sending Devon Witherspoon on those blitzes off the slot. And so I'm a little bit concerned about, the Packers' plan for the blitz in this one after they got a little bit exposed by it against the Lions in the last one. Now, by halftime, they made some adjustments, but you can't go a whole half without scoring. Like, you need to be ready initially.
Yeah, I sure hope they have a better plan from the start and seem more prepared for what's coming and not be taken, off guard and then have to adjust, and basically give up a good chunk of the game on offense because they weren't ready for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the Seahawks are going to test that as well. And they've been really good when they have blitz. So I think they maybe turn that heat up a little bit more. And I think they're going to dare the Packers to beat that. And the Packers are going to have a better plan for that. And so that's something that I'm nervous about. Anything else you're nervous about, Dad? Or should we, maybe go on to, some brighter skies, some greener grass?
Let's go some greener grass, because that was the main thing that I wanted to talk about there.
But yeah, Dad, the Seahawks aren't a perfect team. They have some, weaknesses as well. What are some of those exploitable weaknesses that you think the Packers can maybe take advantage of in this one?
Right. So one of the things is that Geno Smith's efficiency drops significantly when he's pressured.
Mm-hmm.
So when he's not pressured, he's got the 15th best EPA per dropback. But when he is pressured, that falls all the way down to 25th in the league per NFL Pro.
And every quarterback's, EPA per dropback is going to fall when they're pressured, but his, even relative to others, drops precipitously.
It must drop significantly relative to others because he goes from being the, 15th best to the 25th best.
Yeah.
So he's dropping more than, at least 10 of the guys behind him.
Yep.
And then, according to PFF, his passer rating drops from 105 when kept clean to 58.8 when he's pressured. And when he's pressured, he has 10 interceptions to only 5 TDs, so twice as many picks as touchdowns. Compared to when he's kept clean, he has, only 2 interceptions and 9 touchdowns, so 4.5 times as many. So that ratio is flipped significantly when he's pressured versus when he's not. And he's also not so good at getting out of pressure. He's only middle of the league, 21st out of 42 QBs in avoiding sacks when pressured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, that kind of leads directly into my exploitable weakness of the Seahawks is that their offensive line is not very good. It's pretty poor. Here's some numbers for you. They've allowed the 12th highest pressure rate in the league, the 9th fastest time to pressure, so an above average rate of pressure, and they're allowing quick pressures as well. FTN has them as, for run blocking, the 6th worst in adjusted line yards, and they have the 2nd lowest yards before contact as a rushing offense, so they're not good at pass protection or run blocking. And then PFF, for what that's worth, has them as the 6th worst run blocking line and the 10th worst pass blocking line. So poor offensive line play has kind of, been tough for them. Their left tackle, Charles Cross, is pretty good. They have Oluwatimi in at center now, who's, I think, been better than the guy who retired, whose name I'm blanking on right now, who used to play for the Dolphins before. But for the most part, their offensive line's just been in a bit of flux. Abe Lucas, their right tackle's been in and out of the lineup. Their guards are kind of iffy. So I would say the interior is where they're the weakest, but overall the line just has not been very good for them this year. And so that's something where I think the Packers can hopefully take advantage of. And like you mentioned, get some pressure on Geno Smith and make him, make some mistakes and not play quite as well. Yeah.
And if you want another metric for that, looking at ESPN's pass block win rate and run block win rate, they are 22nd in pass block win rate and 28th in run block win rate.
Win rate is something that is so hard to say fast. I literally cannot do it. I say win weight pass every block, single time. Win weight.
Hello, Elma.
Yeah, the
very, very quiet. I'm hunting for win weight.
Win weights. Yeah, but no, it's I think that's somewhere where the Packers can hopefully, get some wins there. I think, it's going to be, like I mentioned, I'll probably talk about this later, but I think Kenny Clark, coming off a really good game against the run against the Lions, hopefully can impact the pass a little bit in this one. We want to see Gary and LVN continue their good run of play. They've both been playing pretty well as of late. Hopefully Enigbari can have a bounce back game. Hopefully we can see Wyatt flash a little bit like we did in the beginning of the season. I feel like I haven't heard his name in a month and a half. But anyway, let's move on though to what we hope the Packers do and how we hope the Packers maybe take advantage of some of these weaknesses. Dad, what is something that you want to see from Green Bay in this game?
So on offense, I want to see them run the ball inside. The Packers are good at it. Between the tackles on offense, Green Bay is 10th in EPA per rush, 1st in rush yards over expected, 1st in yards after contact per attempt, and has the 7th lowest stuff percentage in the league between the tackles. Plus, Jacobs leads the league in yards between the tackles, is 6th in yak per attempt between the tackles, and has the most runs over 10 yards between the tackles. And Seattle does not defend inside runs well. Between the tackles, they are 12th in EPA per rush, 28th in rush yards over expected per attempt, and 27th in yards before contact per attempt, and 27th in yards after contact per attempt. And they are 31st in stuff percentage between the tackles.
Yeah, and I was just looking also because so the Packers are really good at running inside, except on 3rd and short. On 3rd and short,
still
they're still pretty bad. They're 22nd in success rate on inside runs on 3rd and short. And I was thinking about that. I was like we are really good at running inside. And I was like, but why do I feel like anytime we really need a yard inside, it just does not work? And statistically, it says, well, you're still 66.7%, so 2 out of 3 times it does work. But league wide, that's not a very good number. For me, what I hope the Packers do is on the other side of the equation in the run game. I want to see the Packers take away the inside run game and make them run outside. So some numbers for you for the Seahawks per NFL Pro. On inside runs, they have a 45.1% success rate, which is 12th in the league, and negative 0.08 EPA per carry, which is 15th in the league. So they're a league average running game inside the tackles. Outside the tackles, though, a 36% success rate, which is 27th, and negative 0.16 EPA per carry, so twice as bad, which is 30th in the league. So they are like a bottom 5 run offense when they're running outside, and an average run offense when they're running inside. So really clog up the interior, stuff it up, make them extend out to the exterior, make plays on the boundary. And I think that the Packers can, force them into, some TFLs, force them into being behind the sticks. And then hopefully from there, you can rush the passer a little bit, go against that, offensive line that we talked about already is not very good, pressure Geno, get them in third and longs, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I want to hope. That's what I want to see the Packers do in this game. That's what I hope I see the Packers do in this game. But yeah.
Yeah, I think, so who's going to win the battle of the inside in the trenches?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be tough because, you mentioned you want to see the Packers run inside. I think it's going to be a big game for Josh Myers coming off of one of his worst games of the year where, he's going to probably have to deal with Leonard Williams a lot. Sean Ryan's been playing really well, but he is, it's a bit of a spin the wheel thing. Thankfully, the wheel is now, 4 out of 5 good, and then the 5th one is just bad. But 4 out of 5 games will be good, and then the 5th one is just like, oh God, Sean Ryan, please. But he's been way better than anyone would have expected. I was totally wrong about Sean Ryan. He's definitely an above average guard in this league. And then Elton Jenkins, hopefully, he can continue his run of good play, solid play. I feel like I don't notice him very often, so there's at least that. But yeah, so it's going to be a big fight along the interior on both sides of the ball. But Dad, let's move on to our next section, which is don't take your eye off that guy. Who's a player that you're keeping an eye on in this one where it's like, hey, they need to have a good game for the Packers to win?
Yeah, so I'm going to be watching Quay Walker, and I guess if Cooper likely to play too, I'll be watching both of them. But Seattle's only 25th in the league in EPA per pass to the intermediate part of the field. So this is not something they do very well or attack very much. So I'm wondering if this might free up Walker to be more aggressive against the run, where he is much more effective than he is against the pass. They're not geared to take advantage of the Packers linebacker coverage weaknesses. And it may also, help clog up the middle by filling the gaps aggressively in the run game.
Yeah, and I think, Quay in this one, I think it's going to be big having Edgerrin Cooper back. Because I think that will let Quay do. Because in the Lions game, a lot of people pointed out, Quay's probably better as a blitzer than he is as a coverage guy. But McDuffie can't play coverage, so they have to blitz McDuffie. So Quay has to play coverage. But I think Cooper is good enough at covering where you can get Quay moving downhill and blitzing a little bit. Although we already talked about, blitzing is kind of doesn't really work on Geno. It doesn't really affect his rating very much. But I do think it maybe with Cooper in there lets Quay play a little bit more free. I guess we'll keep an eye on that. Although you could argue Quay's best games have come when Cooper is not playing. So maybe that's something as well, although it is a small sample size. For me, the player I'm keeping an eye on, though, is Keyshawn Nixon. We already talked about, he's probably going to have to move to the slot with Jair being out and with Bullard being out. And he's going to have a really tough matchup there. Jackson Smith-Njigba is on fire right now. No one in the league has more yards or receptions out of the slot than him, and he has the 7th most EPA generated on slot targets. So that's going to be really tough. He has been extremely dominant in this run of play. They love targeting him a lot, and he's very quick. So I think that's going to be tough for Keyshawn, and I think that he's going to have a good game if they want to slow down this Seahawks passing attack.
Yeah, do you know any more about whether Ballantyne is... he's been limited in practice, and I don't know if he's ready to come back yet. He's sort of their next man up to play slot if they decide they really want to keep Keyshawn outside. They put Ballantyne in the slot, but I don't know if Ballantyne's ready yet.
Yeah, I don't know if they would do that. I think you could argue that Ballantyne in the slot is better than having Stokes outside. I just don't think the Packers see it that way. So
they don't seem to have done so far.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think they're just going to go with Stokes in the slot. The only thing I could imagine...
Keyshawn in the slot.
Sorry, Keyshawn in the slot. Yeah, Stokes outside.
Please don't put Stokes inside.
Yeah, that is not going to work. But I mean, is there a world where, Zane Anderson played pretty well last week? Do they maybe try and get him on the field and move Williams to the slot?
Williams to the slot?
I don't really like that, though. Honestly, I don't like that at all.
That would be a bold strategy.
I don't think they should do that. But yeah, so I think that Nixon is definitely going to be the one to keep an eye out there, and I think that that's going to be a game deciding matchup potentially. So this is going to be something to keep an eye on. Let's move on to overtime, though, Dad. Anything that we have not gotten to talk about yet that you want to touch on?
Oh, I just said a little note on Love's play. So on the season, he has the 2nd most yards in the league on deep passes. So this idea that I think his deep ball has been much better this year than last year.
Definitely.
So despite missing 2 games, he's got the 2nd most total yards on deep passes and is 6th in the league in yards per attempt on passes over 20 yards. and by DVOA, Seattle is only middle of the pack defending the deep ball, ranked 15th.
Yeah, and I think you can definitely see a difference in the deep ball. I mean, the one he had to Watson against, the Lions was perfectly placed in stride for him. I think he's just been a lot better about, connecting on those, and just I think he's like just leaving less air on them as well. I think has been part of it. But yeah, he's been a lot better with the deep ball in this one in this season. For me, the thing that I wanted to focus on in this overtime period was throws to running backs. The Seahawks have the 5th most targets to running backs in the league. It's actually very evenly split between Walker and Charbonnet. It's like perfectly 50-50. So it's not about, one of them being in or not, because Walker, might miss this game, but that wouldn't affect them throwing to running backs. The Packers are, on the other side, allowing the 6th highest receiving yards per game to running backs. So bit of a, difficulty for them. And I'm also, interested in how the Packers answer, the fact that they could not defend screens for their life last week. Last week, just to retouch on that, Jared Goff went 7 of 7 for 57 yards on screens, 8.1 an attempt. And Geno Smith has thrown the 7th most screens in the league and is averaging the 9th highest yards per attempt on those at 6.5. So in Jared Goff is number 1 by a mile. But so they didn't do well against Goff, who's like super elite at throwing screens. Can they do better against, Geno, who is not quite as good at Goff, but still quite good at it? And the Seahawks like doing it. I think I would imagine that they're going to test that as well after, the Lions had so much success on it last week and the Packers seemingly had no answer for them.
Yeah, they were getting just the setup on those screens, the blocking.
Every single one was a 4-on-3, which, I honestly thought I think schematically the Packers did a terrible job of defending them. Every single screen pass had a 4-on-3 matchup where there were 3 linemen for 3 defenders and the running back could do whatever they want. Personnel-wise, I actually thought that they got out of that okay. Like, obviously allowing 8.1 an attempt is not good, but the fact that you had so many non-ideal matchups on those screen passes once the ball was in the running back's hands, and you didn't give up any, I don't think anything over 18. None of them got housed. None of them went for 25, 30 yards. The fact that you limited most of those to about 13 yards, small miracle, to be honest. And that was another thing that we touched on in the breakdown of this, the Lions game, was that they tackled really well in that game. So I just want to see better answers for the screen game in this one, because they just seemed shocked every single time there was one thrown their way. And, shout out to Ben Johnson, because I think there was, especially the one on the last drive where the Packers sent 8 guys and then they just popped a little screen pass to Jahmyr Gibbs or David Montgomery. I forget who it was now. And it just went for a free 14 yards and a first down. Yeah, they just had them dialed up every time that we just never seemed ready for them, is the other thing.
Yeah, I think we were maybe too geared up to get into the backfield. And so we just totally exposed ourselves to the screen. It's hard
because when you can't rush with 4, you kind of feel like you have to send more. And then that's when you're just totally vulnerable to these screen passes.
Yeah, but maybe they won't feel that kind of urgency against Geno Smith.
It's possible.
So that they'll have a different game plan.
Yeah.
But it certainly exposed them to that. And the Lions seem to be ready to take advantage of that.
Yeah,
they were expecting the Packers to be sending people upfield, and we'll just pop one over your heads here.
Yeah, exactly. And so
the linemen weren't recognizing it quickly enough to stop and turn around.
No, I mean, once
you get to a point where
there's nothing
I'm so far, I'm just going to keep coming.
There's nothing they can do.
I'm just going to keep coming and see if I get to the quarterback and mess it up, or get my hands up in his face to block the deflect the pass.
And I think it's there's a bigger discussion to be had about preparedness on the defense. I don't know if you saw, but Andy Herman posted a screenshot of the 4th and 1 at the end of the Lions game, the very last play. Or I guess second to last play, because the field goal was the last play, or I guess third to last play, because they also ran one to get on the right hash. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But anyway, on that 4th and 1, it was just that, Rashawn Gary not on the field on that play. Why is he not on the field on the most important play of the game? You're in a normal base defense when they're in a 3 tight end look with a running back. They only have 1 receiver out there. Why do you have 2 corners on the field? They're going to run the ball. Why are you in a normal base defense without your best edge rusher on the field? And so that's a question that I think is preparedness. That's a coaching question. And so I want to see, translating that to this, preparedness. I want to see them more prepared for screen passes. I want to see them more prepared for what the other offense wants to do, because it feels like back-to-back weeks, that the Dolphins want to throw it to the middle of the field. You get torn up there anyway. The Lions want to throw to the middle field and dink and dunk you on screen passes. You get torn up on those anyways. And in some cases, I think the Lions, there's a little bit of accident forgiveness because you are so thin in the secondary by the end of that game. But it's still something where it's like, can we take away the other team's fastball? Like, can we look at what they do best and take that away? And so in this game, that will be, targets to outside receivers. It will be screen passes. It will be passes to the running back. It'll be, passes to the Jackson Smith and Jigba out of the slot. Like, can we make them do the things that they're not comfortable doing? That's kind of like what I want to see from this, defensive coaching staff.
Yeah, it would be nice to see a better game plan from the start. And
yeah,
we've had a lot of slow starts.
It's kind of weird. The offense has had really slow starts. The defense, I guess the defense has had. Well, the defense is. It was weird because in the beginning of the year, it was like, wow, the defense to start the game is like, and then in the second half, they would be better on defense and it'd be like, okay, whatever you did at halftime, just do that before the game. And then in this past game, they just kind of, both the last two games actually, the Dolphins won. They, hold them to 3 points in the first half, and then just nothing the rest of the. And then in the second half, they just got kind of carved up. And then in the Lions game, the first quarter they do pretty well after the first drive, but then, and I think the Lions one, you lose 3 of your starting secondary guys and 2 of them in game, like that's going to be hard. But yeah, it is what it is. But anyway, anything else in overtime you wanted to touch on, Dad?
That was the main thing. Is to look at how Love's been playing and how we can maybe take advantage of some things against the Seahawks defense.
Yeah, and
this is not the Legion of Boom.
No, we have some time here though, which I do want to ask you just a question, just to pop on you because I just thought of it here. What are your thoughts?
I have not studied.
You haven't studied. What are your thoughts on, looking back to last game and the Lions' approach to the Packers' offense was, Matt LaFleur talked about this, and a lot of people talked about this, a lot of smart football people were like, yeah, they stacked the box, played man coverage, and dared us to pass. And we wanted to run anyway. What are your thoughts on that? Because I don't think I have a hard time coming to a right answer because just to give my thoughts on it really quick while you study really quick, you cram for this pop quiz I just gave you. I feel like, I understand the argument that you don't want to get one-dimensional, that the ground game is really important to this offense. At the same time, I don't think you can just slam your head into a brick wall over and over and over again and, run for a yard a carry in the second half pretty much. And when they're daring you to throw the football, you have a good quarterback. You have Jordan Love. You have a good pass protecting offensive line. You don't have elite receivers. You don't have necessarily great receivers, but you have enough good receivers. You should be able to, if the other team is daring you to pass, you should pass the ball. Why are we calling an offense where it's like, oh, well, they were daring us to pass the ball and we didn't feel comfortable. Pass the ball. In the second half, they did do it more and they had some success doing it. But you have the quarterback, you have the play caller, you have the weapons, you have the offensive line. If they're daring you to pass the ball, shake their hand, say thank you, and go get 10 yards of play. Whatever.
This is the thing about, don't be so stubborn. Like, this is what we're going to do, regardless of whether it is and you always have this debate, like, do you stick with your identity or do you take advantage of what's given? And sometimes it's like, take the easy road, whatever it is. And if though we did have trouble getting separation. This is the thing. The other part about that, we
did go into, we talked about how their average separation on targets was like one of the lowers in the leagues last week.
It was the fourth worst on the week.
Yeah.
But essentially disrespecting our receivers, say, oh, we can to them one-on-one and send, 8 guys into the box.
But
so that
Reed Reed should be able to get open against man. Having Dobbs back will be big, but Reed should be able to get open against man. If you're playing man coverage without a lot of help, you should be able to hit some, and they did. You should be able to hit a bomb to Watson, which they did hit a bomb to Watson, so that's good. And I just think if they're daring you to throw, okay, why is that a bad thing? It's like, okay, cool, you just want to leave your guys on an island? All right.
Yeah, and daring you to throw, and you say, well, we're going to run anyway, even though you're loading up your defense for run defense, and also have Reed on the field more if they're daring you to throw.
That was something that Matt LaFleur talked about. It's like, we need to get him out there in more 2 receiver sets because they went to heavy personnel a lot more, which is 2 tight ends, 1 running back, 2 receivers. And they had been playing, I think mostly, Watson and Wicks, or Watson and Dobbs not in that game because he was out. But they were like, yeah, we need to get Reed on these 2 receiver sets, which I think is a totally right call and would be a great, addition to this offense to just get him on the field more.
The fact that they talked about it after the last game, I think it should be more on the mind and in the game plan. The other thing I would like, they need to do, is stop making it so easy for the defense to time the snap.
Yes.
And get a great jump on the snap on defense.
I mean,
It's like
the
stop
thing is,
running it
I
down
haven't.
to the last second
Mhm.
every time, so that they know you have to snap the ball.
Yeah, and I think I've been like, mind pilled by all those seasons of watching Aaron Rodgers, where it's like, I'm like, oh, they're not even doing it that much. It's like, no, they're not doing it that much compared to when Rodgers was the quarterback and every play was snapped at 0.
But I always knew. Well, I should say, I always suspected it was a combination.
Yeah.
Of LaFleur and Rodgers, taking forever to get to play it, and then taking a long time to survey the defense.
But it's
decide.
also, it's not just a LaFleur thing. It's this offense. This offense has long play calls. We see McVay and the Matthew Stafford offense, like they end up, taking it down to 0, and they end up having to take timeouts to avoid delay of games all the time. And that's a big, something that people nitpick about that offense is like, it's a lot of a long play call and a lot of motion. And so that's going to take a lot of the clock up, like pre-snap, and it's kind of just a side effect of the way they run the offense. But I do think they could run a little more hurry up than they do, which I feel like they hardly ever do.
I would love to see some hurry up.
I would love to see us also defend hurry up once. Like, I feel like anytime the other team hurries up, we are in a panic. And I don't understand why more teams don't do it against us. Like, we don't know where to go. We're not set. I mean, that's what happened against us on that touchdown where they had Amon-Ra in the backfield and Jahmyr Gibbs out wide. Eric Wilson didn't know where to line up because they hurried up. And we were just like, well, touchdown. Here you go. To like, here's your points. But yeah, so I would like to see more hurry up on offense because, yeah, I mean, Myers didn't play well last game, but taking the snap clock or taking the clock all the way down to the play clock all the way down to 0 every single time is not setting your center up for success. He has to play better, but let's help him out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the guy is basically next to his shoulder, before the ball has even reached Love. You see on these shotgun snaps, like the ball's in the air and the guy's already halfway past Myers.
Yeah, and I think sometimes I think they fall a little too in love with the hard count, and then they end up running it down to 0. I would like to see some.
Speaking of hard count, for the love of God, will you stop faking going for it on fourth down?
Yeah, can nobody we go for believes on fourth down like one time?
Could you actually go for it some of these times so that maybe that will actually improve your chances of these fakes working? Nobody falls for this anymore.
Yeah,
nobody believes you're going to go for it, so they just sit there.
Yeah, I mean,
please
we have
actually
to be,
go for it on fourth once in a while.
We have to be one of the least aggressive fourth down teams in the league, I feel like.
We are actually bottom this year.
We are? Okay.
Yeah. I've seen a few articles on it lately that it didn't used to be this bad. The first few years of LaFleur, he actually was pretty good about going for it on fourth year. But this year, I think we are like, whatever the scale is, the cowardly score or whatever they call it.
Yeah, I mean,
we are. I think we might be rock bottom.
Yeah, it definitely feels like we could be way more aggressive on fourth down. Now, at the same time, I do feel like we're in a lot of our fourth downs are like 4th and 5, where I'm like, okay, that's kind of like a toss up. So
we also have not had that many plays where the analytics say go for it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like a lot of the fourth downs are not like 4th and short.
7 or 8, and 3 of them were against the Lions in this last game.
Yeah, and I mean, they probably should have. Fourth downs were the difference in that game, you could argue. So, but yeah, so offense wise, you'd like to see them, take if the defense is giving you something, just take it.
Just take it for the yards.
Yeah,
it's like if you have a guy playing like 10 yards off the ball,
and I think
part
of
coverage, just take those free 8 yards.
And, we're rambling a little bit, but I do think part of that is, their struggles in the quick game so far this year. Now, whether that's Love or schematics, I think part of, maybe not wanting to as a team, try and throw into those like tight boxes. Because normally I'd say like, okay, we'll just like throw hot to your receiver out wide. But when they're throwing quick right now, I just have a number for you. In passes that are under 2.5 seconds, they're 9th worst in the league by EPA per dropback. Like, they're just not very good in the quick game right now. So maybe that's why they don't want to throw against those stacked boxes as much, because on first down, they're trying to get some yards and they just don't trust the quick game. I don't know. We're just kind of hypothesizing here.
And does that mean like we're getting press man? The corners are actually right up on the receivers, so you don't have that open couple of yards on a quick slant?
How many times have we seen like they don't run it often, but I feel like on those little quick glance like screens to like read or something, how many times has been almost a pick? Like where it feels like the guy's just right there.
So glad
instantly.
the guy didn't.
Oh man, thank goodness that didn't pop in the air.
Yeah,
and I wonder if there's a tell or if they, know something about like, hey, when they're lined up, like stacked like this on the outside, like they're going to run a screen most of the time. So just try and blow it up.
Receiver screen out there.
And yeah, it's like, okay, like this isn't working.
Guy just going to jump that route and take it to the,
yeah. And then they're running like slant flat stuff. And you have the scenario like against the Texans where the guy comes off the flat and just picks it almost instantly. Like I just feel like their quick game is a little bit, leaves something to be desired a little bit. I don't know. But anyway, this is why we call it overtime.
See them fake that a few times because I think teams are getting ready to get a little jumpy.
Yeah,
you're like,
I mean, that's what they hit against. That's what they hit against the Niners on the Bo Melton touchdown in the playoffs. It was a little fake screen, and then Bo Melton just slipped his way out of there. And that's also kind of what they hit against the Lions on the tight end leak. They hit to Musgrave for that touchdown. Was they had
the one up the middle.
Yeah, no, that's the Rams one.
Rams one.
The tight end leak, which was up the right sideline for like the 40th point against the Cowboys in the playoffs. The Luke Musgrave one, where he just catches it and there's like no one for 20 yards around him.
And they say Musgrave didn't fall down.
Exactly.
You stayed on his feet play.
But you can see on that play if you rewatch it, it's kind of a what they're playing off of is the throwback screen they threw to Aaron Jones against the Bears in Week 1. It's lined up exactly the same. Love moves to the left, looks like he's about to throw it back to Aaron Jones with a wall of blockers. The guy burns it upfield, but then he just throws the freebie to Luke Musgrave because that guy came up. So you make a good point. They could fake some of that quick game stuff and try and hit a big play off of it, which they've done in the past.
Right, which would also then slow down the reaction against those quick plays as well. If you burn them because they're playing up so aggressively.
Yeah, so I would like to see, the quick game just hasn't been very good, so maybe that's why they're not passing against these advantageous looks on early downs, but just something to keep an eye on. But anyway, that's why we call it overtime, because we just talk about whatever. But Dad, let's move on
until we're overtime.
Exactly. Let's move on to the bottom line. Seahawks win if blank.
So what was it? If DK Metcalf, who's been on a bit of a slow stretch lately, but if he goes off for multiple big plays against our backup corners. That's because in part I feel like that would be in addition to Jackson Smith and Jigba having a big game and not instead of.
You're already consigned to that. You're like, yep, that's going to happen, or nothing we can do about that one.
And so if Metcalf is also getting some big plays against us, that could be a long day.
Yeah, I have something similar. I said the
also,
Seahawks...
also if they get a touchception again.
Oh yeah, well, fair enough. I have something similar though. I have the Seahawks win if their weapons are just too much for the Packers secondary. Like we mentioned, they have an advantage over all of our corners, so those guys are going to need to really step up. But I could definitely see a scenario where it's like, okay, it's like just can't guard these guys. Like we're in one-on-one matchups and they're just beating our guys. Their guys are just better than ours. So I could see that happening. But Dad, other side of it, Packers win if blank.
So what I have is like if the Packers convert their touchdowns on scoring chances and don't waste yardage. One thing I found interesting from teamrankings.com is that the Seahawks in their last 3 games, their defense is third best in fewest points per yard given up and have forced the second most punts per score. So almost twice as many punts as scores. They've given up 1.8 punts for every score given up. And that's up from what they are over the season. They've also forced more turnovers per game, 1.7, up from 1.2 they were before the last 3 games. So that's part of their hot streak on defense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the Packers need to be more efficient about, points per yardage. And something they've been better at lately, the red zone has been better lately.
Yeah, they've been better in the red zone
I think
recently.
They just have to convert their chances.
Yep, I totally agree with that. I think that what I had was the Packers win if we can just run the ball and play some ball control. I think if, we win the time of possession and we're able to run the ball and, convert those scoring opportunities, I think we can win this game, especially if it's going to be raining. But Dad, any last things that you wanted to touch on before we get out of here?
I think that was it. That last little nugget.
Okay. Well, anyway, thank you so much for listening. This has been our
we have our score predictions.
Oh, you're right. Score predictions. What do you got?
So I have the Packers winning 27-21.
Okay, I have the Packers winning 20-17. I think it's going to be low scoring. It's going to be a low scoring game. But hopefully, we're both right and the Packers end up winning regardless of what the score is. But once again, this has been our preview of the Packers' upcoming Sunday Night Football matchup against the Seahawks. Should be a very good game. Dad, I'm jealous that you and Eli are going to be at that one. Hopefully you guys have a good time.
I am
hoping
that you're wishing you had been there.
I hope so too. But anyway, thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe, comment, leave a review, tell a friend, whether, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, all three. We would really appreciate it. Once again, follow us at Father Son Packer for the latest Packers news and updates on when we drop new episodes. Check us out after this game. We'll be doing a post game on this one. We'll be doing post games and pre games for every single game the rest of the way. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.